All right, and we are live with another Beyond the Escape. I'm Michael Blogic,
I'm Dane Collins.
and tonight we've got Brian Cooksey, co-author of the Sagaborn role-playing game, RPG guru, and all-around cool dude.
Hello. Good to be here.
So I've been chomping at the bit for tonight because my mind has been on our topic ever since the last time Danny and I talked. And I think I know that I sent you guys an outline of what we're going to talk about tonight. But what I think we should do is we should just skip right into sanity rules, and then we'll deal with the book outline and table of contents at the end if there's time. Because really, I think the sanity stuff is way more interesting than coming up with the outline. Not that that's not important.
That's okay. I have a lot of notes for things to ask about, and it's all related to the sanity rules.
Okay. Awesome. So I'll start out and I'll say why I went down this path. Was last time when we talked, Danny, you talked about the different sorts of fear that monsters create with us. And 2 days later, I played with my normal group, and sadly, Brian couldn't be there that night. So I don't know how he would have reacted to this. But they busted into a room, and there's 3 necromancers there sucking the soul out of this guy. Not really. They're sort of like pulling his life force out, not like his soul. And then there's a big golem guy in the background. And so the players, well, really one player, who was the only one that could see in the room because they had no lights on, all the candles were out, just cast fireball in there, kills 2 of them, and kills the guy on the table who is being, life drained. And I thought, wow, like it wasn't even a question in his mind on what to do. And after the whole battle, he's like, well, that guy's probably going out anyway. So I just helped him along. And so I thought even more important than showing fear of monsters, because I wanted the scene to be very creepy. It was very creepy. If you saw that in real life, like you'd freak out.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, like when we put in ravaging magic, I assumed that people would be upset that their character got uglier and uglier the more they ravage. But it turns out that players don't care about character appearance. So then I thought, man, if we introduced a mechanic that made them have like consequences for doing this stuff, and the worst consequence that you can really give a character is for that character to still exist, but then they have no control over them, right. Which goes in with the monster thing that you're talking about, Danny, with werewolves. And so I just jumped head first into these rules to try to sort of, simulate that in the game. But this is why we brought Brian on, is because, Brian, rules.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, like, for example, what is the best game that has... Oh, actually, let's jump back a second, because I sort of don't like calling it sanity points and sanity rules. Like, I'm feeling that that's pretty problematic. So first off, what do you guys think of that? Like, what can we do to make this not seem so insensitive,
Yeah, this is a discussion that has been going on for decades, simply because no one, to my knowledge, has come up with a significantly better term for it. The best ways that I've seen it handled, and I can go into some details later, is just to do exactly what you're doing and be aware that it's a sensitive topic, and aware that it's a loaded term. And also, for any GMs out there, if you think that your players are going to have any issues with the way it's presented, obviously, talk to them beforehand, or actually talk to them beforehand and find out. So in my opinion, and I've read some discussions about this in a bunch of different places. The word sanity itself, I think, is not the issue. It's the way you handle it and the way you present it. And what you were talking about, like being freaked out by different things, violence, both seeing it and performing it, that kind of thing. I think that's a good path to go down and a good way to look at it.
Well, so here's I do actually have a little bit of an issue, and I hadn't thought about it earlier, but as I'm processing it right now, I'm realizing some of what was written in the initial notes includes things like phobias. And there's another thing I was thinking about. So let me take a step back here, because I was thinking about you made me think about our modern world. And there's a lot of people are freaking out about the way the world is changing. And I'm not going to get into a political discussion or my views on anything, but I think it's undeniable that people are freaking out right now because, the human mind kind of evolved to be indoctrinated into a certain culture. And that's the culture that you live with for life. The world is changing so fast now that people are looking at it and thinking, this isn't the world I remember when I was a kid. All of these, new laws that are allowing people to get married that didn't used to be able to, and things like that. And then automation with technology, people are scared about the future. So now you imagine you're in a world where there wasn't magic. And now not only is there magic, but there are these creatures that are attacking people, and they have these powers that you've never, talk about a changing world. People would have a really hard time adapting to it.
Yeah.
But is that sanity? And the other thing I was thinking about, and I think this goes along with it, is, when we think in the modern world of something like PTSD, we obviously don't want to get into that probably in the game, but that's sort of what we're talking about, is you've just gone through a really traumatic, horrifying experience, and maybe it's going to leave you changed. So do we want to talk about it in terms of sanity? And one thing I liked, it was actually a question I had, is I noticed you used, Mike, sanity threshold at one point, and at another point you said affliction threshold. And I was going to ask you, were those two different things, or did you word it differently? And I might prefer the word affliction here.
So looking, the main things I focused on were the Pathfinder sanity rules and the D20 sanity rules, to see sort of what they'd done. The D20 ones, you could definitely tell, are a little dated in the terminology that they use. And so, like, I try to change some things, like, for example, they called it like temporary insanities and permanent insanities, and I changed it to disorders because I think that is a little bit better. And I'm looking for different names. So sanity threshold and affliction threshold were actually two separate things. But I was trying to find new words to go there. I forget what it originally was, and I didn't like it at all. And also making sure it doesn't ever make anything strange, like, affliction, sanity symbols. So the short version is ass. Like, that'd be my luck. That'd be something in the book. And actually, while we're talking about this, let me get a shareable link. And I'm going to post that in the chat, so that way if anyone comes in and watches, they can actually click and look at our alpha rules. So these are completely alpha. Don't judge anything in here, because it could change wildly.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so what I want to do is I want to make sure that our wording's right. I didn't like some of the stuff I read where what was it? One of the quote permanent like things, you could just grow into it, and I was like, I don't feel that is something that somebody grows into having. It's like OCD. Like, you can learn new phobias when you have OCD, but I don't think you're like you walk into a room, something scares you, and then you get OCD because you lost points.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And I'm actually okay with being less, you know, I mean, I love keeping things simple, but like if we don't name things, like I don't want to name it PTSD because that's like really serious.
Yeah.
Sure.
But
And to be clear, I said that I wouldn't want to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
into
yeah.
that. It was just an example.
I'm with you on that too. I think the best thing to the best place to start from here is what is our goal in having sanity rules. What do we want it to reflect? And anything else we'll just build from there.
Well, I think from my perspective, I would consider two things, and I'm maybe Mike might correct me or shift this a little bit, but one is just having, like Mike said, consequences to some of these encounters that you know, to make this a little more meaningful, and the other is just having well, I'm sorry, let me rephrase. It's all about consequences. But one is in terms of game rule. One side is in terms of game rules, and the other is the narrative.
I agree with you on that.
I think it really is that simple, right, Mike?
Right. And so Sanity, you know, using the word Sanity also does work well, and it harkens back to like the horror style, you know, H.P. Lovecraft and those things that like I think it sets sort of a tone which makes people more cautious. And I don't know if you read it, but did either of you read the intro that I wrote to the Sanity rules?
Yes.
What I was trying to do there was like, I feel that if you set up the conversation in the beginning a certain way, even if there's problematic stuff later on, as long as you set it up and say, this, you know, like we're trying to do this that way, you don't just run in and kill everybody. So I think we're you know, setting it up in the right way. I just want to make sure that we do the best all the way through.
Yeah.
And you know, yeah, it's about consequences, but there is definitely the narrative side too that I want to change it. Like I don't like that D20 is just so combat oriented.
Right.
And the fear of losing oneself, I think adds that next level that I want, you know?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, actually, one of my favorite things about our system is that we ditched alignment, because I could have a whole discussion about the stuff I like about alignment, but generally speaking, it tends to get in the way. And I don't see this as a full-on replacement for alignment, but I do see it as doing some of the work that an alignment system does. Just like Danny mentioned, we've all been talking about consequences, and honestly, that's what an alignment system is. If you are playing a lawful good character and you do something that is on the list of evil acts, you become less lawful good. And sometimes you get in-game consequences for that. Sometimes you get system consequences for it, like if you're a paladin. I like the consequences idea. I like the I do, if we find a thing that is a broader or at least different term that is not sanity, I'm all for it, and I'll start looking for it too, because we might be talking about something broader. In fact, I think we are. I think we're talking about something bigger than that. This is part of it, but now that we're discussing it like this, I think there are I think it's got a broader sweep.
Yeah, well, part of the reason for the stuff I was saying earlier is at the bottom of the alpha or the notes that we have, it gets into phobias, and so that got me thinking that, you know, you could have, and I think that's important to include here, that if I as a player, if I'm playing and I you know, I want to add a little depth to my character, have could give us a system to do that also. So it needs a little flexibility there, but then yeah, what if you run into a circumstance and you develop a phobia as a result? But that doesn't fit under the umbrella of sanity, does it?
Isn't that always an issue with doing these games? I mean, I don't know how many times I've been trying to come up with a word and there are no words.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, for example, talents in the Sagaborn system. You
Yeah.
know, in third edition, they called them feats. I'm
Right.
not sure what they call them or if they even have them in fifth edition, Brian.
They're also feats in fifth edition.
Okay. Like, both talents and feats don't really fit what they are, but you just have to come up with a term, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and then also so this is where I've been going back and forth even with just the name, in that I don't like the implications of sanity, but yet any single person that grabs, like if this is a PDF that says sanity rules, they know exactly what it is.
Understandable. Trail of Cthulhu, which it's the Call of Cthulhu setting, but it's a different system. They break it into sanity and stability. Stability is the more short-term thing. You see something and it instantly freaks you out. You are having a reaction to it right now. Sanity is your long-term mental health. So I wouldn't actually, it might not be a terrible idea to do something along those lines. Because I mean, we've already come up with monsters that can have mental effects on you. So I mean, that'd be like a stability attack right there. You know, for right now, you're stunned. For right now, you are running away. But you get better, you know, pretty quickly. Whereas sanity is long term. It's deeper than that. But again, yeah, I don't think we're going to come up with the word right now, but I am going to start looking for it because I think it's the thing we need to do, where sanity is only part of what we're talking about.
Well, you know, I am, as of now, unless something else comes, I do lean toward the word sanity for the reasons that Mike said. I think it's something people can look at and immediately grasp. I think this is an important conversation to have one way or the other.
It's the best thing we've got right now, and I don't think we're going to come up with anything better. So.
But at least it gives us a little sensitivity going into it, you know. Even so, but what if so coming back to something like phobias, could we make sanity rules that have a simple system? You know, you have a threshold and a rating and all of that, or you know, whatever rules we come up with. But then we have sort of, as part of it, have some sanity adjacent rules, so to speak, of things that, you know, maybe your character wants to have this phobia or your character wants to have this disorder. And even though it's under the sanity rules, we sort of, you know, break it off into here's some additional rules. That way it doesn't look like we're including these, you know, very real disorders that people might have under
exactly,
you know, the heading of insanity.
Yeah.
So I actually already added that in under phobias and fears. I don't know if you guys read that one.
I did.
That's the whole reason that I'm talking about it. Yeah. I guess when I read that, my thought was the relation to the word sanity, and I'm making sure that however we structure this, that we do handle it delicately. But I think as long as it's sort of, you know, like here's some additional rules that you can choose to implement, I think that solves any sensitivity issue that we might be concerned with. I hope.
Well, I mean, I'm sure in 10 years these will be dated rules, but hopefully like our third edition will be out or something.
Yeah, good call.
But yeah, I mean, and it's a learning thing too. I mean, once it goes out there in the wild, you know, we're going to hear stuff, you know, from both the game playing and from the fictional sense on issues that's coming up, you know, and we'll just have to run with it.
And yeah, I can throw out some more examples of things that have handled it differently. Really, as you've written the sanity rules right now, it's closest to the way Call of Cthulhu handles it, honestly, where you literally have a sanity score, and your score goes up or down depending on events. And now, of course, in Call of Cthulhu, there's nearly anything you encounter is going to lower your sanity. And also, given the fact that we want to keep things as simple as possible, I think that's the way to go. I like the idea of having a sanity score. I like the metric you came up with to derive your sanity score. I think that works because it gives you a significant amount of points, and then it would be up to a game master if the game master wanted to emphasize madness, to emphasize that sort of thing, then at that point they just put in some stuff. They put in some heavy. I mean, these essentially be sanity attacks. You put in some heavy things that if this happens, it has the potential to knock down a whole bunch of your sanity. So I like that idea too. And I think that makes sense. One of the things that I do like, and I don't know if we want to go down this road because it's more complicated, but I will, if you guys don't mind, I can tell you about another one.
Sure.
There's a game called Unknown Armies and another game called Nemesis. Nemesis is a free version of the same system. Unknown Armies involves, it's pretty much about madness though. So they go into a lot of detail. And what they do is they have what are called various madness meters. I can't remember exactly how many, but I want to say 5 or 6. And each one is on a sliding scale of things you've been exposed to. The one I remember best is violence, and that'd be probably the one that would be most applicable to to our setting, what we were talking about. But they also, there's one called unnatural that is like if you well, actually that would be something similar to like walking into the necromancers, or seeing an elder god or something like that. That would be unnatural. And I think isolation's one of them. I'll have to look up the rest, but what it boils down to is the reason it's on a sliding scale. We'll stick with violence, for example. Like if you are way over on the bottom end of violence, meaning you've been exposed to very little violence in your life, but then you see something that's particularly violent, it will move you along the scale up to a certain point. And then the next violent thing that happens has to basically beat your new violence score in order to affect you, because you've become desensitized to it. And same thing can happen with unnatural stuff or isolation and that kind of thing, where I like the way they handle that. Again, I'm not convinced we want to do it that way, but I wanted to throw it out there where they break it into different stimuli. And that might be something we want to consider, even where I'm not sure that the sliding scale really applies in this case. But I do like that idea where, you've seen or inflicted X amount of violence, which means, anything over here, you no longer register as a problem. But then, of course, in Unknown Armies, if you have a certain score and you're farthest away from one end, that means there are certain things you cannot do. But then there are new things you can do because you're getting more violent. So like I said, I think that's more detailed than we want to get into, but I like the idea. I like the way they handle that.
So how this would deal with the creature compendium is I would want to actually add an entry for all the creatures that would have sanity effects.
Okay.
Where some creatures, when you just see them, you're going to have to do a sanity check against them. Other ones are like abilities that they have that could freak you out. And I was wondering, is that going to add too much? I mean, cause if you're running into these creatures, you're dealing with fighting, but I mean, it shouldn't
think so.
Too much, right?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a really good idea, especially because it's only certain kinds of creatures. And at that point, it's just another special attack. From a mechanical point of view, and they have a new score to affect. They take away your sanity hit points, kind of. As long as we're keeping it on the mechanical side. I think that makes sense, and I think it makes a lot more sense than. I think adding a sanity score makes more sense than having them affect your wisdom or intelligence or going into a much more complicated method of finding a way to impose penalties just because you saw a crazy thing.
Yeah. So then let's go with the opposite of that. I was at a local thing last week, a World Builders thing, and I brought up the Sanity stuff to a group there to get people outside of gaming to think about it. And overwhelmingly, something that's brought up a lot was positive effects, not from the loss of sanity points, but how you gain them back and how to bring that into your game to bring a group together.
Oh, yeah.
So then that made me think, like, should we have, like, I mean, I don't even think it's a should we have. How do we make it work where a group can gain sanity back together, and then it gives them bonuses, you know?
That's a cool idea. Yeah. I don't have all the details right now, but at some point I can, Trail of Cthulhu has a system for exactly that thing. Where your character has what are called pillars of sanity. Those are usually people, but they could be other things. Usually it's people in your life that are your anchors. And I think that we've all got those as real people, so it's easy to link onto. And in some cases, those could be your fellow PCs. We could do something along those lines, and we could easily steal some parts of that system, I think, because. And like I said, I mean, it would be largely NPCs, I would think. And it would, and heck, that would actually go a long way towards building up more of the world too, which is always good.
Yeah, like maybe certain like NPCs that you could visit that would help, or maybe have a chance of helping, like, because we're also talking about a place where technology isn't as refined, so you could actually have things where people could be trying to help, but then there's a chance they don't.
Right.
But I don't want to get into. I saw some rules out there for drugs that your character could take to help, and I'm like, I definitely don't want to go down the path.
That's iffy. Yeah, I wouldn't do that either. And by the same token, we don't want to make it look like it's too easy. We don't want to make it look like, oh, I talked to this guy and I'm sane now, because that's insulting. But I completely agree that of ways to build it back up, because I mean, mental health is still health. You can heal. So it's a matter of finding ways, in my opinion, preferably non-magical, non-drug use, to repair it. But then again, I mean, to be honest, we could even introduce some magic that would do it,
or drugs.
Yeah, but yeah, like again,
I mean, there could be roots that
have
certain effects and things like that.
Yeah, you want to be careful about it, but I agree. It's not out of the realm of possibility. And I mean, I think the fact that we are talking about not wanting to be insensitive is going to help a lot. we keep coming back to it, and we should, because it's a big deal. But yeah, I'm with you on that. So yeah. I don't have an answer for it yet, but I've got some ideas to. I need to read some of those other rules and come back to you with some things that I think would fit with our system.
I mean, I think if we did like almost like a letter from the creators, where we set up even more than saying what this is for a rule system, just say, hey, look, we have all experienced and dealt with, things in our life. Like, we understand that this topic is what it is, but we are trying to bring this into the game for a positive reason,
Right. Yeah. I agree. That goes a long way. A statement of intent does help.
Oh man, I just spilled gin all down the front of me.
Oh well.
I mean, you had enough gin, I think.
Yeah, first episode I had my beer explode on me. Now I'm spilling gin.
Well, you're keeping it going. It's good.
Hey, what do you think of having at least optionally, so you have your sanity score, and I don't completely have my head around the mechanics just yet, but but you fall below that threshold. What about having like insanity cards or something like that, where you draw and it tells you what, like at least whatever that temporary thing is. So you walk into a dungeon, a room in a dungeon, and you see the necromancers, and you flip out. Well, different people are going to flip out in different ways, and if this is a loss of self-control, then there need to be the thing that happens. So maybe they become paranoid and flip out on their friend, on a random teammate, or they just flip out and go running off in the other direction, or things like that. We could come up with a number of. I may be shattering that sensitivity thing by.
Yeah, I was like, I see where you're coming from. Randomizing it might not work. The only reason, and actually not even from a sensitivity angle, although that may be part of it, but randomizing it might not allow you to make it as situational as it needs to be. But because you'd have to be really, really general on those cards in order to let it both apply to whatever the situation is and to that character. Because like you said, I mean, you had a really good point. Different people are going to react different ways. So,
okay,
yeah.
in that case, walk me through it. Well, I walk into this room and I see the necromancer thing happening, and I flip. What happens?
Well, so I think we'd probably have to write in that the GM can come up with his own. So let me go back to the mechanic real quick that we've got so far.
Yeah.
So you have your sanity points, which is all of your mental abilities added together and doubled.
Right.
Your threshold is 1/4 of your total starting sanity. So let's say your sanity is 80. So that would be 20. Once your sanity points go below 20, then you've hit your sanity threshold, and then you get not an affliction,
a disorder.
A disorder.
Yeah.
Indefinitely, which means that if you go back above 20 on your sanity, then you lose that disorder.
Right.
And then affliction is your wisdom bonus plus your level plus any miscellaneous modifiers you have. So that's let's say you open up the room to the necromancers, your wisdom is -1 modifier, your level is 4, so you only have a 3 in your affliction threshold. If you lose 3 points or more, sanity points or more, seeing this, then you gain a temporary disorder. Now I was thinking of I liked the rolling the random charts that they had in D20 for it, but I didn't like some of the things on it, like
right.
Character becomes homicidal, dealing harm to the nearest person as efficiently as possible. Like, I don't, I would think that it should be either like roll random without crazy stuff like that, or like more things like the character has a screaming fit, the character flees in panic, or we could always have an asterisk that says the GM and the character can come up with something at the moment that they both feel fair.
And I think that, I mean, I realize, I mean, the problem we have is we have a really good group of role players. So I have to remember not to assume that other people are going to play like we do. Because I think that with our group, I think we all know our characters well enough to know what they would do. Like my guy would, like, top of my list is run away. Whereas, I think our Archeon, on the other hand, that's not going to be his response. So, right. So much of it, and it might be just a matter of writing it in. It might just be a matter of saying, the default should be to tailor the response to the situation and to the character. But if you need some, if you need some suggestions, here's a list, maybe something like that. Because
okay.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, but for the sake of simple game mechanics, this is going to be, in a sense, like a light switch.
Yeah,
you're perfectly normal, and now you've lost control until you get above, and now you're back.
Agreed. And that's, right there, that's not realistic. But it would but we're playing
a game, and you have
but we're playing a game. Yeah, exactly. By the same token, I personally cannot get hit by a sword 4 times and still keep fighting. So so you have to abstract some of this stuff, and that's what we're doing. Oh, and that's exactly okay. There we go. We need to make sure we point out this is an abstracted system. This is not intended to represent real world sanity. It is, though we're trying to be sensitive to it, this is to represent a reaction to an extreme situation.
But I was, for the sake of the game, I was really trying to clarify that there will not be a scale to this.
No, and I don't think there should be. I think that's
below the threshold. That's it.
But I do like the combination of the affliction threshold and the sanity threshold as well. I think that makes sense, because if one thing does X amount of damage, it's going to shake you up. Even X amount of sanity damage, it's going to shake you up. I like that idea. I think we're coming back to the consequences thing. And I don't have a good answer for it yet. I think we all have some good ideas, and I think the general D20 stuff, like you mentioned, Mike. I mean, I agree that I like the idea of this is the list of things that can happen, whether or not it's a matter of making it fit the character, because the whole point of this is to be story based. And if part of the story is your character is having your character's sanity has been shaken, we need to find a good way to tell the story. But we need a way to tell the story. Excuse me. We need a way to tell the story that's not that fits, but also that's not too complicated. Our game's not about sanity. So, unlike some of the other ones, we don't need the sanity rules to take up an enormous amount of space. We just, the whole point of it is that it needs to be simple and easy to work with. And I don't think that goes against our other goal to give people consequences for either doing or experiencing sanity shaking things. And of course, keep in mind, because it's a sanity score, it's really easy to just, if a group wants to ignore it, they just don't have a sanity score. Fine. You're not playing that way, and you don't have to. And this is modular. Taking out that sanity score doesn't affect any of your other stuff. It's not like removing Constitution.
Right. It's actually, I've started doing some sketches. It's going to be like the 4th page of the character sheet. So it's going to be something completely on its own.
It's literally removable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And,
so I think one of the things that we can do is on the short-term disorders, the temporary disorders, things like screaming fit, fleeing panic, becomes catatonic, like stuff like that. I think like those things that you can happen when you're in shock but aren't. I mean, D20 has some really strange ones. Character gripped with a strange or deviant eating desire.
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah, okay.
Like
that's a really weird specific thing to have on a random table.
Right. Yeah. So I think when we talk about like the being careful part, I think it really comes down to what we make on the random tables or the things to give people jumping off points. And one of the things I didn't want to do is if someone is all the way down at their bottom, which is -10, where they lose control of their character, I think Pathfinder had like lots of details on the insanities you can get, and I don't want to go into that. Like if you just hit -10, your character is no longer together and you can't control them anymore. and we're not going to try to make this that realistic that we're like, but this is what made them go crazy, you know, like, like here's the thing that made them go to -10, but we're not going to go in and psychoanalyze what, you know, disability they have.
Agreed. That's not what this is about. And at that point, it's nearly identical to the mental domination rules, because if you lose control of your character, you lose control of your character. That's it. Except in this case, it's a permanent loss of control. But it's literally the same thing. The game master says what your character does. You, as the person that made up the character, you know, you have some input. What do you think your character would do if he went that crazy? Okay, that's what I will have your character do. We can work with that. But I agree with you. I think that's yeah, we don't need it to be that complicated.
Well, and also I think that the other thing that we should be pushing is this is not like hit points. Like, I don't think I ever want to present my characters with something where they're going to hit -10 and lose control of their character like they would hit -10 with hit points. Like,
yeah.
Like the how you come back from that is just as important as losing it. So like, and I think you can have some really positive messages in there and positive gameplay resources to gaining back the sanity. Like, it shouldn't be, you know, and I'm sure some people will, because some people love killing their characters and some people will love putting their characters in situations that make them go, you know, mad and lose control of their character. But for me, like, I want it to be a balancing game where you are going to go out and risk things, and there are going to be scary things that happen and twisted things that you see and choices that you make. Brian, you missed in our last game. They found a Grim Mortis, which is a book written by the necromancers from the Last Age. And of course, Leshy is wanting to rip into it and learn everything inside of it. And immediately when we started talking about, I started thinking about sanity rules, is like, man, there needs to be like a roll every time he opens that thing up. And so then if he does hit -10, it's totally his choice for barreling into chasing that, you know, that power gaming thing. Not that it's power gaming, it works with his character, but you know what I'm saying? Like, he's not going to reach a point where it's like, oh, well, you just made me lose my character. Like, no, this is a slow choice that you made over time. You know,
it's incremental. He'll see it coming. Exactly.
Yeah,
I agree.
So yeah, so I definitely think that the treatment, you know, or the recovery, maybe that's a better word, because it has mental treatment here.
Yeah. I was just looking over that section, and I like the recovery idea. That's perfect. Yeah.
I think that'll definitely work better. Now, Danny, how do you see this all fitting in with the things that we talked about with your scale of monsters and what fear it strikes in us? Like, do you see this working well with your scale, or?
Yeah, no, and as a matter of fact, I'm excited to. It gives us a new way to approach some of the creatures when it comes to the narrative aspects too, to the writing as we're doing the creature compendium.
Agreed.
I've even already been thinking about, there has to be at least one moment where I write about this creature that I encountered it, my character encountered it, and I lost control. You know, I want to write that so people, so that people, as they're reading it, start to realize, you know, start to understand how this works in terms of the story.
Yeah, cool idea.
So yeah, I think it's perfect.
One other thing that is, you know, we talked about the fears and phobias earlier, and I don't think we actually talked about the rule side. So if anyone's watching, they didn't get what we were talking about there. In that, one of the things that always happens with characters is I like my characters to give me 2 fears that they have, and then the characters either forget about it, or when it happens, they're just like, oh, well, I'm not that afraid of this spider, or I'm not, you know, oh yeah, I don't like water, but I can get on a boat just fine. You know, this time. And so what we would do is a character can choose something which normally does not require a sanity check and name it a fear. For each fear, they gain +1 to their sanity score. So it's a small bonus, but it's still a bonus. But every time they encounter that fear, they must roll a sanity check with a -3 penalty. So, I mean, it could be something really random, like the fear of dark spaces. For me, and with the players I play with, like, this would not fly with your general Pathfinder group, I feel. This is something Danny and I talked about so often, was the escapism, or what was it, Danny, that you always named it?
Fantasy fulfillment.
Yes. These rules are not fantasy fulfillment. Like, who wants to, like, be judged for running into a room and blowing up a bunch of orcs with a meteor swarm? But I feel like there are a lot of people. Like, there's a lot of people that don't want it, and those aren't the people that we're interested in. It's the people that do want to name that, and that would think it would be so cool to have a fear of water, and then, like, actually have to roll something, and their companions to have to drag them onto the boat, or, like, maybe they have to get them drunk,
Yeah, and find a way to work around it. Yeah.
Yeah, then, I think it's far more interesting to have a character who has a weakness and overcomes it than to have a character that has no weaknesses.
Yep.
Yeah, and like, in role-playing games, you're trying to take real-world experiences and give them numbers and make them simple enough to deal with. And I really base this on my mother, and this is like a funny story of how to get a phobia, because it hasn't affected her life in any way, other than she can't fly anywhere. She never wanted to get on a plane. We moved to Tennessee, so she had to fly from Detroit to here. They got on a plane. My dad said, well, at least our plane's not that one. And they look out the window, and it was like a patchwork plane. It was, I guess, back when Southwest was pretty new, and it was like the plane was like half yellow. So then they turned a corner. It turned out it was their plane.
Oh.
And they got on. There's a lot of turbulence. And my mother, who's not a large woman, broke the armrest, like, off. She was so afraid of being on that airplane. So her fear of planes really dropped into phobia. So she missed her sanity roll. It went below her affliction threshold, and she turned her fear into a phobia, which then meant that, like, whenever we went on, like, really far trips, we took trains everywhere, which is a totally cool thing. Like, it ended up being sort of neat, and maybe if my mom drank more gin, she'd get on more planes. But that's like a real life. I started thinking, like, how have I experienced this, or, one time I got food poisoning from Taco Bell, and they said that it was the lettuce. And so now I was just, like, iffy about lettuce for like a year,
Right.
And it's like, that is a perfect example of, like, a temporary phobia, or a temporary disorder that I had, where, like, every single time, sometimes I'll just pass up having lettuce on things because there's that fear of it, and then it's, I slowly work my way through that. And now I truly believe that you only get food poisoning when you don't expect it. Like, I don't know how many times I've eaten something. I was like, this seems, I eat on the road a lot. Like, this seems a little shady. Like, am I going to get sick? Like, should I be getting sushi at this truck stop? I don't know. Never sick. And then, like, randomly it's like, oh, I had SpaghettiOs and I'm now having this issue.
Yeah.
So, maybe that should be a coping mechanism under recovery, where you come up with your own legend for how something can't happen to you again, All right. So we covered.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
I was going to, we're probably running fairly close up to the end. I wanted to ask a couple quick questions. First, I want to confirm that the plan here is, are we going to make this its own sort of little booklet of sanity rules? And then also, I assume we'll implement what's necessary into the creature compendium?
Yes. So the creature compendium, and this sort of goes into what we're going to talk about with the outline of it. Most monster books are pretty simple. Monsters, short description of what the stats mean. That's it. So I figured we do more like story stuff, monster descriptions, gaming stuff in the back. And we will have a quick mention of what the Sanity category or the Sanity stat means. But this will be a separate book. And what I've decided is, being such a small company, we can't do things that like the big guys do where, here's a 400-page Dungeon Master's Guide. Here's a 400-page, creature book. Like, they've got so many people working on stuff, and there's so many things I want to put out, but I don't have time to put them out, and we don't have the time to be constantly making these huge books.
Right.
And so we had the discussion on the Facebook group of the name for the add-on books, and I've ended up really liking Ethan Siegel's suggestion of
I agree,
Codex Dominum.
Yeah.
And so I looked it up, and actually a codex was what happened when they started figuring out that, hey, we have a bunch of scrolls. What if we put them in a binder together? And so a codex is literally like a binder of scrolls. And I was like, so we can just put out all these rules as separate codexes.
Sure.
And then we have the Codex Dominum, which is the master code.
I like it.
That gets printed that has them all in one book.
Yeah.
So that's a long way of saying, yes, the rule, like these Sandy rules will come out as probably like an 8-page PDF. And, and then also as we see issues or hear feedback, we can go in and change it. So it can like literally be out there for a year or so, or maybe 2, depending on how long it takes us to get enough stuff to put the book together. And then we can actually have sort of like play tested stuff.
Yeah.
I've got other things that I'm working on with that, like crafting, attacks of opportunity, like really exploring that. And also I came up with some rules for exploration adventures on how to like randomly generate characters going through the nature and like getting lost too, and actually adding a dynamic to exploration that's not just like, I want to end up there, giving you some stuff that's like, that makes that scary as well.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
Well, my 2 last questions that go together, and then all of my stuff is out of the way. Although I think I know, after the conversation we've had, I think I know the answer, because we don't want to complicate it, but I think it's worth mentioning. Some of the Sanity rules hinge on this idea that I walk into a room and I'm so stunned by what I'm witnessing that I can't handle it. So the 2 questions I had are should Luminars be less affected because they've spent a great deal of time studying? They're familiar with some of these ideas. Particularly, part of the reason for that one was you mentioned the books that cause this. Seems like a Luminar might be less affected, and the other is, should the effects lessen with time? You're a 40-year-old grizzled adventurer who's been doing this for some time. You're probably less likely to take a hit. Although, again, now we're adding too much complexity, probably. But I thought
not
it was
necessarily. I think that even if I think certain things, just like certain things can give you penalties, some things can give you bonuses. So it's, in my opinion, it's mechanically it's as simple as giving you a +2 on a roll or something.
Right.
One of the other thing that we will be doing with these small books is there'll be additional talents, so we could actually cover some of that.
Oh, right, that makes sense.
As talents,
yeah.
So you could have a talent available to a Luminar or something like that.
Right. Or just talents in general, where it makes you less susceptible to this stuff. Like right now, there's no talents for these rules. But for the attacks of opportunity, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 new talents in that PDF already, which that's not out yet, but like it should be coming out soon. So yeah, we could deal with it that way. And then also the effects over time. One of the things with that is the affliction threshold is your wisdom bonus plus your level. So as you gain in levels,
good point.
Your affliction threshold.
That's right. Okay.
Larger. So that's the one way I thought we could have it.
Okay.
Adjust with experience.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. One last one I forgot. This going from 0 to 10 to -10. Let me. So, if they drop to 0 or lower, they begin the quick slide into permanent insanity. Each round they lose, so forth. Survival or persuasion skills can be used to stabilize a character. And it hit me. What if you had a sleep spell and you just knock them out? Things along those lines.
Yeah. Or if you leave it,
because I realize that would be my first thought. You know, you have if we explicitly state that you can use persuasion skills and such to stabilize them, I'd think, well, just not. Actually, I thought Lost style. You remember in Lost, for some reason, every episode somebody would get knocked out.
Like the minute you said that,
for some reason nobody ever gets brain damage.
I just saw Brian and ours group like that would just be their go-to.
Yes,
like,
it would.
Like the minute someone loses their sanity check, they just knock them out. I'm like, they weren't even gonna like get anything. They're like, oh, sorry, just you know, it's better just to knock them out. You know?
We're just we're playing it safe.
Yeah, you guys just like knocking everyone out. Actually, the last session where you weren't there, Brian, you knocked out 2 people, and they've discussed now building a 2 jail cells in the basement of your guys' house to store prisoners, which is so creepy, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's like sanity checks just on its own. Like, oh, those guys, no, those are just from our last adventure. We haven't figured out what to do with them yet. we killed all of their companions.
And we just decided to lock them in a cell. Yeah, good call.
Really, what I should do is I should just do a drawing of Justin and just say, really, the sanity rules are really because of Justin. He summoned his first creature this last time. He killed 2 of the mercenaries that were barring the way from you guys. And then he told the summoned creature just to have at him. And then everyone brought up, well, what happens to all the stuff that it eats when it disappears? And I was like, you guys are all like so weird. And I was like, you know what? Sanity rolls. You're going to be rolling them all the time, you creepsters.
I think you're right.
All right. So we're coming up on our hour. We haven't had anyone join the chat and ask any questions. So unless you guys have anything else, I think we'll wrap it up.
All right.
I think we've started a really good discussion. And again, I like what you've got already in the notes. I think the alpha version is a really, really good start.
Well, good, because you'll see that at work next time we get together and play.
Indeed, I will. And if I have any ideas, well, I mean, I do have some ideas. If as soon as I have follow up on the stuff that I said I was going to follow up on, I'll get back to you on that. I'll send both of you an email or something and just run it past you.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for talking, guys.
Thanks a lot.
See you soon.
All right.
Oh, and everyone that watched, see you guys soon too.